part of the shadow economy of trade of oil, and it is quite difficult for the U.S. government to trace these basically informal trading of oil between Iran and China. And from technical perspective, one can say there are significant substantial costs in that, and expected benefits of these new round of sanctions also unclear, depending on the goals of the centers of the sanctions. It is to change behavior of Iranian government. The previous round of sanctions showed that basically they are counterproductive, and that makes Iranian government more willing maybe to also engage in the conflict, the more sanction imposed on this country.
So given that Iran seems to be able to circumvent the sanctions and increase its oil exports, do you think the Biden administration will go to further sanctioning?
Well, I mean, we are in the election year in U.S., and one should basically also, I'm sure that the U.S. administration, there would be a cost-benefit analysis, and expected costs of increasing additional sanctions in Iran, especially in our oil industry, which is also affecting the Chinese economic growth, would also result to more political tension between China and U.S. on one side. On the other side, it could also add a positive increasing shock to the oil market, which at the end, the cost would be transferred to the U.S. consumers. And in this election year, which U.S. basically will face competition between Biden and Trump, this is a very central issue. The inflation rate, the growing inflation rate, or gasoline prices in the U.S. would be a very crucial factor. So I would believe that given the current condition, the enforcing of this new round of the sanctions is quite less likely, in my view.
Okay, so when Iran says it's managed to shield itself from sanctions and is resilient, its economy is resilient, do you think that's totally true across the board?
Well, Iran has shown that basically survived the painful sanctions. If we look at the Obama sanctions 2012 and up to the GCPOA, and after that reimposition of sanctions by Trump on Iran, we do see immediate negative effects on Iranian economy. Of course, GDP growth, domestic production has declined significantly within the first 2 years of the sanctions, but then recovered slowly. The Iranian situation is like a person with a significant back pain, which basically the body tries to adjust itself to this sickness.
Right.
So at the end, the welfare situation has reduced, but the economy has shown some significant resistance.
Okay, so the economy is resilient. What about from the point of view of the man and woman in the streets? How are they affected by these sanctions?
That's true. I mean, when we talk about the economic cost of the sanction, one should separate the short-term effect, middle-term effect, and long-term effects. We have seen that the short-term effects is obviously visible in the negative growth rate. Recovery has started in the years after the sanctions imposed on Iran because the new ways of doing business as identified by the Iranian government. However, still Iranian economy is in a bad equilibrium compared to the pre-sanction period. So inflation also, as reported to, has increased substantially. When we look at the 10% inflation rate before Obama sanctions, now it is more than 40%. Devaluation of Iranian currency has also made much of the imports much more expensive, transferred to the consumer prices. The higher prices will be paid by the Iranians in the market. So all these factors increase the economic uncertainty in the middle term. In the long term, of course, the cost will be much more substantial because we need to take into account the effects of sanction on education, on health, on environment, on the loss of human capital in regard to these all migration that we are observing. So in that sense, the net effect of sanction is something negative, right? And this is something that the people also realize in the daily life. But the question whether that has resulted in substantial change in Iranian behavior, we cannot trace that in a substantial way. So the political behavior
And any potential sanctions continue to have Iran's ability to wage war, do you think?
well, initiating and financing the war, of course, is an issue that we don't see that in the Iranian agenda. So to initiate a war, but if your question is about, funding kind of military adventures in the regions, that's very much depends on the domestic and external factor and domestic situation. We are under sanctions still, and finance available to basically fund a military operation is quite limited. There is a additional pressure on the government to increase the taxes in order to cover some part of the budget deficit under the sanctions. So economic indicators are not showing that the country is ready for or is able for long-term military kind of conflict with specific neighbors in the region. On the other side, one basically needs a kind of mass mobilization in Iran for these type of activities. The years under the sanction has resulted and mismanagement. This is also something that one should acknowledge that the sanction is one factor, but the quality of governance and mismanagement in Iran is another factor, and both of them are important. So this mass mobilization of Iranians to support this type of activities has also degraded over the recent years. We are talking about the trust between the civil society and the formal institutions. That has been weakened, especially after the protest of 2022 under the Human Life Freedom. And all these factors basically indicate that the situation to initiate such adventures is not available.
Okay, appreciate your analysis, Mohammed Reza Fazanagan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now then, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and more than 30 million tourists come each year. And most visitors to the floating city of Venice in Italy are there just for the day. Many residents are now complaining about pollution and rising rents fueled by the excess of tourists. Well, now Venice has become the world's first city to charge day trippers around $5 entry to try and curb over-tourism. Payment system is now being launched in a time-limited pilot program. Visitors will need to download a QR code that may be checked by control. Transgressors risk fines starting at 10 times the entrance fee. The city of Como is also considering introducing a similar fare. Many cities right across the world impose taxes to limit the number of tourists. That includes Barcelona and the island of Bali. So to take this on, joining us from Vienna is Claudia Dolezal. She is a professor in tourism and sustainability at the Institute, I should say, of Tourism at Krems University. Claudia, welcome. What do you make of this new charge in Venice?
Hello, thank you very much. Well, of course, what we're seeing in Venice is not really surprising here. Venice has been battling over tourism, too much tourism, for quite a few years now. Last year, Venice was close to being put on the UNESCO World Heritage list of danger, which means that the city of Venice would be endangered. And of course, what we're also seeing is increasingly more tourists, and on busy days, nearly double the amount of tourists in Venice as we have residents. So the, the, the entrance fee that is introduced now is, of course, not surprising after other measures like banning cruise ships. This is not new.
Okay.
That Venice is trying to do
And we
more.
can see why they're doing it, but how is it likely to go down with tourists, do you think?
Yeah, I think that actually it will not deter tourists to visit Venice in the future, because I don't think that €5 will actually put you off to visit Venice if you always wanted to visit Venice. But of course, what might happen is that tourists might be more leveled out throughout the year, because of course Venice is asking for this charge only on 29 days a year, which are the busiest days. And so maybe tourists find that too much of a hassle and go on another day. But in the end, I don't think that this will reduce the number of tourists. What it rather does is it actually creates another symbol for showing that Venice is turning a little bit into a theme park. We're really going down the route of Disneyfication here, of charging entrance to a city that is actually someone else's home.
Yeah, in Venice, of course, some residents say that more attention needs to be paid to boosting the resident population and improving services for residents as opposed to focusing on tourism. And it's a fair point, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, and we see this all around the world. Of course, in Venice it's extreme, and of course, what the government is saying with an entrance fee or with tourism tax is that we are using this for the residents. But I can also understand that residents cannot see the actual changes in their lives when they're trying to take the boat in the morning, or when they're trying to have a coffee somewhere. We really need to drastically reduce the amount of tourists, and I think we can only do that by actually reducing overconsumption, reducing access, reducing flights, and there needs to be more drastic measures than this.
Overtourism is increasing around the world, isn't it? Why is it becoming such a thing?
Well, we've seen various factors that have given rise to this phenomenon, particularly before the COVID pandemic. Factors such as on the supply side, we have all the cheap flights, we have the sharing economy with Airbnb that has exploded, we have new markets traveling that we haven't seen traveling before. But also on the demand side, we see new developments. So obviously with the influence of social media on tourism, we've seen increasingly more people wanting to go to these honeypot sites and actually trying to consume a destination from a perspective that they're taking pictures of it. And this combination has led to really dangerous mix. And over tourism has increased immensely over the years, also because governments have not put the residents first, but they put the tourists first, and they put the economic income first that tourism brings to destinations, of course.
Claudia Dolezal, thank you.
Thank you.
And that is our show for this week. Do get in touch with us on X, formerly known as Twitter, of course, @NickClark, @AlJazz, and do use the hashtag AJCDC when you do. Or drop us an email. Countingthecost@altazero.net is our address. There's more for you online, of course, altazero.com/CDC. That will take you straight to our page, which has loads of individual reports linked to entire episodes for you to catch up. So that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Nick Clark and the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is coming right up.
Sinha believes that we shouldn't underestimate the consequences of snatching animals from their natural habitats.
Family groups are separated, and infants and juveniles are separated from their mothers, and it causes a tremendous amount of social disturbance in these populations, which we just don't think about. And we know how cognitively and behaviorally sophisticated they are, how complex they are, and yet we put them into a cage under artificial lighting and keep them all their lives.
He also believes that science isn't the only factor to consider.
We keep thinking that if I have a degree, if I work in a research institution or a university, I'm best placed to understand the macaques. And so, if you do experimentations, let's be aware.
Kaltuun jaama. Halo kaltuun.
The stream on Al Jazeera.
Hard-hitting interviews. Has the IRC suffered casualties? We have not suffered fatalities, thank goodness. We did have injuries from a missile strike on a guest house.
Thought-provoking answers.
So to whom did you say no double standards? To all, to all of us. Anyone in particular? I say
Will Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP increase its rule across the country? How will economic uncertainty and youth unemployment sway voters in key states? And will the media be able to cover the vote freely and fairly? Ongoing coverage of India's elections on Al Jazeera.